Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Dominic, dentsu International's Chief Technology Officer. Welcome to another installment from the dentsu International Women's Day Global webinar series. This week, we're hosting a series of important conversations challenging the status quo so that we can explore how to fundamentally transform the way we support women and create a diverse and inclusive culture at work. Research studies show that women are significantly underrepresented in the technology workforce. In the US, women hold 25% of computing roles. In the UK, it's only 15%. It's also compounded by a lack of racial diversity too. The survey spotted that in the US, only 5% of those women in tech are Asian, with Black and Hispanic women being 3% and 1% respectively. Many factors come into play here, starting with inadequate exposure to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in schools, and additional hurdles for women to overcome in recruitment, retention, and professional development. Today, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to moderate an expert panel who will explore the root causes of this gender imbalance in data, technology, and media, and most importantly, discuss how we can all take action to challenge and change this in our daily working lives. We'd also love to get your feedback and questions using the Zoom Q&A function. So without further ado, let's meet our excellent panel, an incredible group of women who have significant experience in this space. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, their role, and also their role model. So Cara, could we start with you, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kara Osborne, and I am Dentsu International's Media Service Line CTO. I've been with Dentsu for about 9 years, working in data, analytics, and technology. And prior to the agency world, I worked in sales and marketing at Fortune 100 companies across automotive, telecom, publishing, and mobile gaming. And I've been lucky to work with several women in my career who have been practical examples of how to navigate a career in male-dominated practices. And specifically, I owe a lot of gratitude to one of my first bosses, Vivian Terrell, who mentored me early on in my first technology-heavy role and provided opportunities for me to train and learn across the company, which didn't naturally come to that role, on how I could impact other departments and groups and make a positive impact in a technology role.
Great to have you here, Cara. Thank you. Kris, would you go next, please?
Sure. I'm Kris Shea. I am Microsoft's account CTO for Dentsu. I've been with Microsoft around 2.5 years, initially within the retail sector, and I've been working with Dentsu now for around 6-7 months. I spent a lot of my career within customer data, behavior, data science, within the retail and manufacturing fields, both traditionally quite male dominated, especially within the tech sector. Similar to Cara, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of women who've been really aspirational in not just seeing how they've led their own careers, but also how they've led and supported others throughout and bringing others with them, as well as working with a business, working for a company for a large part of my career with a female CEO, Dunnhumby with Edwina Dunn, and a great role model, along with a number of other leaders within the business that really influenced me throughout my early career in particular.
Excellent. Thanks, Kris, and thanks for being here. And we really value our excellent relationship with Microsoft. Libby, could I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Libby Barden. First, I just want to say happy International Women's Day week. I guess there is such a thing now. It's great. It's really a privilege to be here with you all. And Dominic, thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. Within Dentsu, I am the HR lead for the Customer Experience Management service line. I come from the Merkle organization, and my interest in women in tech goes way back to the beginning of my career back in the 80s when I joined then Arthur Andersen, later on Accenture. I worked with clients directly for the first 8 years or so of my career. And even though the people who answer my help calls and the CIO would never believe it, I actually used to code. I'm one of those people that learned how to do COBOL many years ago. So my experience goes way, way back. My primary role model is actually my mother, who's still alive at 88. And in her mid-30s, went to law school. She taught me that I could do anything that my 5 brothers could do. And she just kept pounding it into my head, and somehow I believed her. So here we are.
Excellent. Great to have you here, Libby. And I wish I'd known that, because I could have got you to help with my COBOL when I was at university. Great to know. And our final panelist, Margaret, would you go next, please?
Yeah, so my name's Margaret Wagner. Thanks so much for inviting me, Dominic. I'm president of Merkle EMEA. I've been with Merkle for 5.5 years now, going on 6 years, which is hard to believe. And my career's always been in the sort of CRM, data space. Merkle was really my first entree into technology. And I've loved it. I love the pace. I love the change. I love the different partners and the growth in the industry. So been really excited to be a part of that journey for the last 5.5 years. And, Libby stole mine. My role model is not her mother, but actually my mother. She was of the same ilk, right? Which is you can do anything. And, she was this incredibly vibrant and gregarious woman, did not go to college because women in, the 30s didn't go to college, and was probably one of the most learned women I knew, and was constantly breaking barriers, including being the first female select woman, which is mayor in the state of Connecticut, and something she was really proud of. So I've always admired women who have really sort of paved the way for the rest of us. And it made me think about Kamala Harris, who, not only female, but being the first female Black vice president of the US, I think is so inspiring and is such a great light for women today. So I think those are the 2 women that I think of most right now when I think about women I admire.
Excellent. Thank you, Margaret. And thanks to all of you. What a great panel and what a great set of role models. Okay, so let's get into it. So first question, I'm going to aim this at Cara and Kris. You've both had successful technology careers. And what I'd like to know about is, looking back on your roles so far, have there been any defining moments where it's propelled you forward or blocked you, held you back on your path to become senior technology leaders? And maybe, Cara, you would like to start?
Sure. My time on a large global automotive media account about 10 years ago was absolutely pivotal in my technology career. There was no one else to fix the challenges we were having, and I had a variety of experience, not technology specific focus, but solutions, data, and analytics focused. And so I didn't have the exact skill set that one would think you would need in order to solve the problem, but we were having challenges landing technology for this client, and I could clearly see the need and a solution to fix it. And because I had such conviction about that solution, it pushed me to advocate the senior leadership team in a way that I hadn't up to at that point in my career. And I received their support to put that solution together. I was given the freedom to build out a team. And over a 2-year time period, my team and I were able to deliver a solution that is partially still in use today. And I think that success was so fundamental for me because it gave me confidence that I could create a technology solution, that I did have the variety of skill sets and experience that could come together and deliver value for a client. And it helped me understand how much I truly enjoy creating product and technology solutions. And it really has led me toward a technology-focused career ever since.
That's excellent. And we see that every day in all the great work you're doing at dentsu. So thanks for sharing that. And Kris, what about you, please?
So I'd say I had the opportunity quite early in my career to work abroad and lead a client engagement in what was a very lean in-market model. So there were 2 of us in market, and we had a core kind of virtual team based back in the UK. And having that responsibility along with that core team supporting really gave me the confidence to move out of my comfort zone. It also led to me discovering what I love most about my job and what I've gotten a lot out of in terms of my career, which is around understanding the nuances of businesses and cultures and driving change and outcomes through that understanding. But that confidence to be out of your comfort zone can come from anywhere. It can come from your colleagues, from family, friends, the business culture itself. And I find that having consciously looked for that source and then cultivated it throughout my career has made a massive difference. For me, I've defined what that looks like in terms of business culture. And it's been essentially a core part of what I have focused on when I've looked for my the next move within my career. And it's been, I would even go so far to say, as a deal breaker. It is a really significant element for me because it does enable me to push that little bit harder and push myself out of my comfort zone. So I would say cultivating that, identifying it and cultivating it has been really important for me.
Excellent, thanks. Yeah, and we see that all the time in our relationship with you, Kris, in the leadership role you play with us at dentsu, and obviously, we have a female CEO at Microsoft in the UK who replaced, previous female CEO. So really, really strong evidence at Microsoft, which is an inspiration to all of us. Great. Okay, let's turn to another question. I want to really dig into recruitment and retention now and understand more about any blockers or challenges there. So I want to ask each of the panel what they see as the most common challenges in recruiting women into tech roles, and what are the practical things that we can do to address them. Margaret, maybe we can start with you. What are your views? Is recruitment a big area where we need to focus, please?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two challenges, right? One is actually perception, right? That technology is, a male-dominated area to be in. And I think part of that's changing the language around the opportunity in technology, right? That it's instead of talking about technology as a product per se, talking about it as an incredibly creative environment, right? So using the kind of language that we know attracts women, I think is a way for us to think about recruiting differently. And then, for women like the women on this panel, being out in front and being seen, as leaders in that industry and really making an effort. I was commenting before, I think it's my fourth panel this week. It's so important for women to see women in these roles and not just being successful in these roles, but enjoying these roles. I think that's a really, really important component. But, look, it's language, right? Let's talk about the creativity. Let's talk about the growth. Let's talk about, the expansion of ideas. Those are the kinds of things that I think would draw more women into the space.
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, that's very clear. So being that visible role model, making it exciting for candidates so that you're a shining beacon for them, and also thinking about the language. So Cara, does that resonate for you? What would you add?
Yeah, definitely. A couple years ago, I had read something that was talking about how women tend to apply for jobs if they can satisfy almost 100% of the requirements, whereas men will apply with far less, so maybe 20 or 30%. And that difference, when we look at things like technology, that has generally been a male-dominated industry with very strong language in the job descriptions about what must be delivered and the technical aspects, preclude a lot of women for putting themselves forward for positions. And so we need to look at actively lowering the barrier to entry by what language are we using in our job descriptions? How do we set up the interview panel? Do the women see someone on the panel that looks like them or that they could identify with? And the burden really is on us to make it easier for them to see themselves in our culture. Just like Margaret was talking about, it's so important that we advocate this idea of technology not being a specialist piece, but we use technology in our lives on a day-to-day basis. Everyone's walking around with a cell phone. It's embedded into our lives, but understanding that you could have a career there and that you could use your creativity to change the course of a solution, I think is really exciting. And we need to take it on ourselves to help women see themselves in those roles.
Yeah, that's excellent. So that creativity, that vision, that helping people to imagine themselves and having that bravery, as you say, to apply for things where maybe it's a stretch. And the other message I took out of that is, men, you've been found out. Everyone knows that you're blagging it and you're applying for things that you're not qualified to do. That was Cara's other key point. So excellent. Kris, what would you add around that, around your thoughts on recruitment and the issues and how we can address that?
So I'd really build on what Kara was saying. You know, technology is developing and changing at such a rapid pace that learning and skills are an everyday part of our job when we're already within the industry. So I'd say an awareness that technical skills can be taught in the job and the value of demonstrated achievements and softer skills should really hold more weight in recruitment. Whether with individuals who've been, for example, out of the workplace for a period of time, or those who are looking to shift focus into a tech or career role. You know, I feel there's an over-reliance on specific tech skills in job descriptions. And yes, there are some roles that do require that level of specificity, but businesses risk missing out on some great talent by not necessarily really addressing what the role needs in terms of those softer skills and the experience outside of the technical, solutions, et cetera, that are often, a laundry list almost on some of the job descriptions and can put off people, especially as Kara said, a lot of women will be reluctant to apply unless they actually feel they meet, 100% of those requirements.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely right. And if I can comment from my point of view, obviously there is a big technical component to technology, but absolutely, as Kris is saying, where things go right or they go wrong is where, there are good human relationships between stakeholders and the tech team, where there's good collaboration. And those, for me, are even more important than the technology. I've seen lots of good technology delivery fail because those things are not there. And I do feel that women can bring a lot to that, exactly as Kris is saying. I'm going to turn on to retention now, but Libby, you've overseen a lot of very major recruitment activities. So before we talk about retention, anything to add from your perspective around recruitment, please?
Well, it's interesting. I think everything that we've heard is true. I do believe that, especially what you just said, Dominic, is true. And that is that technology is really about logic and communication. It's about being able to translate a business need into commands that tell a system what to do. And so I think that often women will kind of take themselves out when they should actually see that they're very much in the right scope of skills that are needed for what we do. If I think about, again, I may be an odd example since I'm in HR now, and people think of that as something that's soft, and believe me, it's not at all either. But if I look back at my background, my undergrad was around communications and TV production journalism. And then I couldn't get a job that paid me more than basically minimum wage. So I ended up going back and getting an MBA. And during that MBA, I focused on IT. But I focused on it because there was a professor who basically said, you're one of the most logical people I've met. You need to actually focus over here. This is the right kind of skill set for this. So again, I think the point is it's about logic. And so that's an important thing to recognize when it comes to recruiting.
Great point as well, absolutely. And maybe I could stick with you, Libby, for our next question. We talk now more about retention. So once we've done that great work and we've got more women in the organization, how do we keep them motivated and excited? How do we retain them? Yeah,
well, there are a lot of things I want to talk about on this topic, but I'll start and you can come back to me again if there's not enough comment here. But I think one of the most important things really is that, and I know this is true of people, so I don't mean to generalize about just women, but I think we see it more with women because so often much of what happens around family is focused on us. So the whole concept of not taking yourself out of the game, to Sheryl Sandberg's, lean in concept is what I think is important. So we see an awful lot of women take themselves out of the game in anticipation of what they want to be able to do around raising a family. And I think we as an organization have to get much smarter about how to ensure women see other women who are in the midst of that, along with help from their partners, whether they're male or female, getting through it and staying in the workforce while they're doing it. And that means we have to accommodate. So I think that's a really important retention challenge. And then let's hear from the others. But if they run out of things to say, I've got all sorts of things to say about data on this too, Dominic.
Yeah, perfect. And we're already, by the way, we're getting some good questions. I'd just say we've got almost 200 people with us today. So thanks for joining. If you do have questions, please do chat them and we'll look to address them. So yeah, Margaret, let's continue on the points made by Libby. What would you say around retention? What's the secret sauce there?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's about having, the right programs for everyone, not just for women, right? That support individuals, work-life balance, right? So, we've just initiated a program for new mothers, right? Which gives them more time off. It gets them back full time. Those are the things that we really do need to be looking at to try and do. But look, it's still the hard conversations, right? It's still the, gender equality, it's the pay scale imbalances. Those are all things that need to be brought forward and have to be addressed. And, while they can't all get fixed immediately, people have to know that you're having the discussion. I think that's a big part of retention, right? If people don't believe that the conversations are happening, they'll have a certain level of patience with the time it takes to make those changes, but you really need to let the teams know that these conversations are happening, right? So whether that's for women, whether that's BAME, it doesn't matter. The door has to be open, and the transparency about where you are and where you want to get to has to be there. So I mean, we benchmark ourselves. We talk about it in our all hands. Came up again yesterday on one of the panels. It's not enough, to just be talking about it. People have to see that you're trying and that you're making progress. So I think for me, that's the biggest part. If people don't think you have their back, they're going to go, right? That's just how that works.
That's clear. That's clear. Thank you. Cara, what would you add?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Margaret just said. And you have to have the conversations. So it's not just about getting someone in the door, settled into the team, but they need to be able to see a career path. How do they grow their skills? How are life events, as Libby was saying, how are life events treated? Do they feel dinged? And, the only way that you can do that is having honest conversations. So we have to talk about the challenges. We spend quite a bit of time as a leadership team talking about how do we promote women, how do we bring them in the door and promote them. And then we talk about that as a wider group. And I think doing that makes a massive difference. So because we've made it a focus in the organization that I lead up now, about 50% of our workforce are women, but we've talked about it. We've made it a priority, and they can see themselves progressing. And that ability to not only say, all right, I can see myself as part of the team, but I can see myself in that next level will make them want to stay. So I think it's really important that we have those conversations on an ongoing basis.
Great. So lots of communication and that network effect and that virtuous circle of reinforcing it. Kris, maybe, I don't know, is there anything you can share from Microsoft, who have been real leaders in the whole diversity and inclusion agenda? Any particular top tips for retention of female talent that you'd like to share at this point?
I would really emphasize Cara's point about making it a part of the conversation. And it's not just about one day, 1 week, or a month at different events. It's about making sure that there is that conversation and that it's talked about. Within Microsoft, we have an incredible amount of training that we have access to. And part of that is providing training for people to better understand different styles of work, what the allyship, culture, diversity, all of those elements, which I think are really important to have as part of the resources that we have. So it's not just the events, it's, it really starts to become embedded in the way we behave as employees to each other, and when we look outside the business as well to recruit. And that kind of becoming part of the culture is really important to make it very sustainable over the long term.
Excellent. So we've actually got quite a lot of questions on recruitment retention. So I'm actually going to take some of those now before we move on to the next topic. So I'll put these to the panel. Anyone can take them. So what would the panel recommend to women who are inspired and looking to move into technology but don't necessarily come from a tech background? Anyone like to take a crack at that?
Well, I'll start us, Dominic, but I think that just understanding initially what kind of skills are sort of the skills of the day is an important thing, because you don't want to go in completely blind and like you haven't even bothered to research. But what I would say is don't be afraid of it either. Like, be willing to go and have the conversation about your interest and why you think, in fact, you have skills that could be appropriate in that area. So I would encourage it. And I think it's one of those areas too that, there's certain things that they're male dominated for a while and then they eventually become female dominated. And I don't think any of us understand exactly why that occurs, but it does. Like in medicine, there's certain types of medicine that have changed over the years. So I think this is an area that will change, because I do think it's very much an area that is about, logic and communication. Those are super key to what gets done. And so just don't be afraid. Talk to people. Find somebody who is in a tech space already and talk to them. Male, female, doesn't matter. Talk.
Great. Don't be afraid. Make the leap.
Yes.
Thank you, Libby. Anyone else on the panel want to add to that in terms of how we encourage people to jump?
I will, Dominic. I remember, when I was getting my first financial advisor, right, and sitting in a meeting with him and not understanding a word that he said, right, and getting to the end of the meeting going, okay, so I'm good, right, and then that happened a few times till finally said, wait a minute, like I need to know what this language is. And the person sitting across from me owes it to me to make sure I understand what they're actually saying. And I think that applies to, technology as an industry. I remember having this conversation and someone saying, well, look, every industry creates language to keep other people out, right? To make them the expert. And you have to realize so much of what we're doing, it's just a version of something else with a different set of words to be used. So don't be intimidated by the industry. I love what Kara said before about we're in technology. We're all on this call right now. We're all using our phones. We're all home networking. All of our technology, right? We know we live and we breathe this stuff. So yeah, do your homework, but don't be scared off about believing that you couldn't possibly know what these guys are talking about, because it's just the background to what you do every day. So, just be gentle with yourself. You're much smarter than you think you are,
Great words of advice there. So just on a similar sort of track, but slightly different question, maybe Kara, I'll ask you to answer this one. How do we encourage more young girls, is the way it's expressed, to go into technology careers?
Yeah, I think that applies to young women in general, and people of color, and diversity. And frankly, you build better products when you have a diverse team, and companies perform better. So I think part of it is, I think Margaret mentioned this earlier, it's about putting ourselves out there and having the conversation so people can see someone that either looks like them or they could imagine themselves being in that position. And so I think a lot of it is about advocacy. I believe Libby had said something about this earlier this week about bringing someone with you. Like, how can we bring women with us on the journey? But that starts at a really young age. And so when I think about my stepdaughter, who's 11, and she talks about, I don't know about technology, but she's solution oriented. She's creative. She can see patterns. She has that logic that Libby was talking about. And so helping her see that, I could do this. It's not just for the boys in my classroom, makes a really big difference, but it's conscious conversations. We can't just assume that they're going to see us as women in technology as a minority and say, yeah, I'm going to join. We have to have the conversations, just like we do with the women that we're encouraging within our teams. We have to have it with girls that could be, change the course of technology history.
Yeah, excellent. Change the course of history. That's brilliant. I love that. So Kris, a quick question for you from the audience, and then we'll get back to the main questions. When you're hiring, what are the key soft skills that you look for?
So I'd be looking for things like, it very much depends on the role, of course, but focusing on understanding how someone might have overcome barriers in the past, how they had demonstrated the experience of learning new skills and then applying them to the role. perhaps looking at problem solving and collaboration, and how they've demonstrated leadership, not necessarily in a management role, but where they've been able to demonstrate those skills as well. So it's not necessarily, limiting it to the, like I said before, the technology that is going to be relevant in this role, but how they've demonstrated the types of skills that I would be looking for them to be doing within the role in other ways. Which really opens it up to different individuals. You know, at a previous company I worked at, I was hiring for a team and looked at some very non-traditional backgrounds and ended up with one of the highest performing teams I've ever worked with when I was at dunnhumby. And it was because of that, looking at the those types of softer skills.
Excellent, thank you. That's great advice. Okay, let's get back to some other questions. So all change happens one person at a time. And Gandhi famously said, you must be the change you want to see in the world. So what do the panel think individuals can do to make the change happen? Libby, do you want to start? Thank you.
Yeah, so to me, this is one of the most interesting questions. And I know that you should never generalize. I know you shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. And I'm going to say that in my experience, I've seen that an awful lot of women are very, very careful about what they say and when they enter a conversation. And so I really believe that individuals, like as leaders, we need to encourage, particularly all people, but the people that we see on our teams often are women who kind of hesitate. So encourage them to be brave about saying what's on your mind and not kind of holding back, not waiting to be invited to the conversation. And in fact, there's one thing that I would very specifically say on this, and that is that somebody gave me this advice years ago, but he said, don't ask, can I ask a question? And so many of us do that. And we understand that we're just trying to be polite, kind of female to female. We understand what that code is. It's a way of saying, you stop talking now, I want to interrupt and say something. But instead, the point is, say it. You've already asked a question. By asking, can I ask a question? You've asked a question. So just be bold, jump in. And if we can kind of reprogram ourselves first and then help the other women that are on our teams to do the same thing, I think it'll make just a world of difference. So that's a very personal thing, but I think we all know what I'm talking about, and when you see it. And I think when you see it, you need to address it.
Don't ask for permission, own it.
That's right.
Anyone else on the panel want to add to those comments?
I would say that confidence is so important. And I think that it's going against the grain, and especially when you don't see other people that look like you in the room. So as you're trying to overcome that, and you can't just model someone else's behavior, and you really have to go out on a limb, that being bold, that confidence is so important. And I think that has to be encouraged as far as the culture, and then we have to go above and beyond to let people know they have this space to share their opinions and their thoughts, and that there aren't dumb questions. You can ask that, you can educate yourself, and that helps everyone in the room, because there are probably people that would love to ask the question, but they don't. So I think that confidence is so critical, and that we need to foster that.
Okay, now I'm going to make this even more interesting, because the two answers I've had so far, if I've understood them correctly, are very much from a woman's perspective, right? But we need to talk about the other half, or the other 75%, the men. And I've got a question here. Plenty of my male colleagues, even at a senior level, do not understand the issues around gender pay gap and equality. The unawareness is to an extent that some of my colleagues think that celebrating Women's Day is anti-men. How do you deal with this set of employees who seem to have no knowledge of the very real issues on the ground? It's hard to even speak about this without getting offended. So perhaps Margaret, Kris, still answering the question, what can individuals do to ensure that change happens? But can we address, what do men need to do?
Ooh, that's a putting me on the hot seat. There's a great question actually in one of the panels earlier that said, do you think men don't, is your impression that men don't listen as well as women do. And I said, no, I don't agree that they don't listen. It's just, I think oftentimes it's, they're already looking for the answer, while the question is being asked, right? And I think that pertains here, which is like, hey, we're doing this. We've got International Women's Day, we're doing the gender pay gap, we can't change everything overnight. And, you get that, like, the noise feels very, it can feel very sort of disparate and like, oh my God, we're talking about this again. And point of the matter is, yeah, we're talking about this again because it's not done yet. We're not done yet, right? We have to keep the conversation alive. So, I think if you have the impression that someone isn't listening or doesn't care, you just have to be not angry, but really clear and articulate on why it matters, right? Have the facts, right? So any meeting we go to, I will always reach out to Libby or to Jane Wright, who heads HR for us, and go, give me the numbers. I need the numbers, right? And we put the numbers up, right? So if men like to deal in facts and numbers, put the numbers up, right? All of these things are real. But the same thing is like, don't make them wrong either, right? We're on this journey together. And yeah, it didn't start in a place that was particularly fair, but we've got to bring everyone along with us. So know your stuff, have the data, and educate, right? Really educate. But don't get angry, don't make people wrong, keep that inside, because that's how you're going to bring more people along with you.
Great advice. Thank you, Margaret. Kris?
I was going to say very similarly, starting from a point of empathy as well, as opposed to combative.
Yeah.
If we want allies, we don't want to push people to become defensive. Most people aren't comfortable with change. And the reality is that this does mean change. So we want to be able to go with those facts and figures, with educating, awareness, realizing that we're trying to make the pie bigger. We're not trying to take part of the pie from men. We're looking to grow it, and bring women into it. And that point of empathy is more likely to bring people along, and create allies out of the individuals that were described in the question.
That's great. Thank you, Kris. I really like that. Libby?
Dominic, I'm sorry to like butt in on this one, but I think it's such an important topic. And the whole idea that if International Women's Day is anti-men, I think is part of what the question was. And it's so not. It is so not. Like, we all need men to be involved in how we solve the conditions that are there, for women, for LGBTQ, all the different pillars of diversity. We need the men involved. And I think to the point that was just made by Kris, part of what I think we have to be careful of as females is that we don't make men the enemy, and that we use language. Like, anytime you want to speak to somebody, you use language that they can understand. If you're going to speak to somebody who only speaks Italian, you're going to speak to them in Italian, right? And I think that part of what we need to do as leaders is understand our language needs to be factual, and it needs to be drama-free. I know that women talking to women can at times get a little dramatic. So I think one of the just practical takeaways here is try to drop the drama, just stick with the facts. To what Margaret was saying, like, have your facts, have your figures, go into the conversation. But men, I think, understand better. I have 5 brothers, so this was literally beaten into me early in life, but they like to know the facts and figures of anything. So have that, and they'll hear you better, and they'll become those allies because they'll understand what you're saying. But they're not wrong just because we think we're right. They're not.
Yeah, great advice. Cara, anything you want to add? Any particular thoughts on what individuals can do, and particularly male technology leaders and teammates?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as a woman in technology, I would say you generally, in the past, especially when I first started, I felt like I had to overcompensate. So you come extra prepared. So you're like, it goes back to that idea of you need to do 100% of the job description before you apply. But it's that ability to have empathy for your colleagues, and then also just talk about it, address it head on. And I think there was a question that came through that was around, how do you deal with people that think that you're bossy if you state your opinions and you have those facts and figures? But I think it comes down to open conversations. It's not about calling people out or making it uncomfortable, but it is having an open dialogue about the challenges. And I found that when you have those conversations, your male colleagues generally show up. Now, you're going to have some people that won't, that don't care, they don't want to engage. But, honestly, within a strong working culture, we should be having those dialogues, not just about gender gaps, but almost everything that we work on. So if you come to it with a good attitude, with the idea that I want the best solution for my team, for my career, for my company, I think your colleagues will show up. And I think our male colleagues want to be educated, and I think they want to partner.
Excellent. Okay, quick, rapid fire, final question for all of you. Answers in less than a minute each, please. What is the one practical action each person attending today can take to challenge gender equality and drive progress, meaningful progress? Cara?
I think it comes back to education. It comes back to talking to your teams, making sure people feel educated and empowered. So yeah, I will always come back to the education point.
Brilliant. Thank you. Kris?
So I'd bring it to the kids in your life, whether it's your own children, nieces, nephews, godkids. Look at what they're passionate about and help them understand how tech influences, and get them excited about the idea of how they could influence it by being part of the industry. And make it relevant to them, as opposed to something that just seems like, the adult's job, but really how it affects their lives today.
Excellent. And Libby, 1 minute answer?
Yeah, I would say it is the kind of flight attendant instructions, but start with you, kind of speak up yourself and really kind of lean into the situation, and then teach other people to do it. I'm being repetitive of Cara and Kris here, but in fact, you have the ability to bring people along on this journey, and you make a huge difference in their lives by connecting with them. And you don't have to call it mentoring, just offer to spend some time with somebody, talk to them for a while. You'll be stunned, but they'll want to talk again in a month or 2 months, and then again and again, and it becomes a mentoring relationship. So you just have to do that.
Excellent. Thank you. And Margaret, your one bit of advice for everyone, please.
For me, look, it's be present, right? It is not somebody else's job to get this done, right? It is all of our jobs to get it done. I think, leadership here, it is so important, right? All the leaders at dentsu, are so committed to this topic and so committed to getting this right. But, keep challenging, and be part of the solution, right? Don't just be part of the problem, right? So get involved, raise your hand, get on panels, talk to people, keep the conversation alive. That's my advice.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a great way to end. So look, we've come to the end of our time, but I'd like to thank all the panel members for sharing their incredible experiences today and helping us think about our tangible actions as we go forward. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending and asking all the questions and making this International Women's Day Global Webinar series a success. We can all take these steps to change the gender balance across the industry. And I hope you're leaving today feeling empowered and full of great ideas to make a change in yourself, your team, and your network. Please do join us or stay tuned for our final panel after this on gender equality with our global CEO, Wendy Clark, and one of her key mentors from her career, Shelley Lazarus from Ogilvy. The link will be in the chat. So thanks very much. Be well. See you again. Bye-bye.